So the title kind of gives it all away, doesn't it? The fallacy of self-esteem. It is a fallacy that people need to have better self-esteem. We'll say that right up front. People do not need more self-esteem. I'm sorry if somebody told you you need more self-esteem and that's your problem. But that's actually not our problem. We do really well at esteeming ourselves without even trying. And just the idea that I need to get more self-esteem for me tells us we already have it because I'm so worthy of having more esteem of myself, right? It's just so funny how this has fallen into the world's thing. So before I get started, let me just tell you there's a lot of quotes tonight that I'm gonna read from both sides, and so I do a lot more reading than I normally do. I put them up on the screen tonight so that you can follow along. I think it's really helpful when there's long quotes when they're actually on the screens for us to view. So that's why you'll see my head down a lot tonight, things up on the screen a lot. But I just want to be as clear as I can about some of these thoughts. So, and you know, I'd say up front, this is like one of my least favorite lessons to teach. Okay, because there's very little biblical part of it. Like we're not really going to dive into the word very much like we normally would, because I need to explain what's out there, and let us digest it, and then see. You know, we've already been taught the Bible. We've already been taught a lot of this, so we should be able to apply a lot of things that we've been taught to this particular topic. But I really wish we didn't have to talk about this at all, and we could just dive right into some other things. But it's so prevalent in the church that I just can't ignore it. So I keep thinking one of these years I won't have to do this anymore. But then time goes on during the year, and people keep coming in and being told and thinking that they just need more self-esteem, and that's the problem that they're having. So I'm like, okay, I guess I got to keep talking about this. So anyways, we're going to do that. So to get your mind spinning and thoughtful about this, because it's not just about the topic, it's not just about you per se, but it's also thinking about, in this class as a whole too, is thinking about, okay, one, how do I grow? We've been talking a lot about that, and we're still going to. But also, how do I help someone else grow? How do I help someone else who's struggling with something? And as a church, we see ourselves as not just a church that has a biblical counseling ministry where all problems go to the biblical counseling ministry, but we see the church as able. The Bible says you are able, if you're a believer, to give counsel to one another. So we want to strengthen and enrich our own walk so that when something like some of the situations I'll pop up here come to our attention, we might have an idea of what to say and how to handle some of those things. So let me just get started. What are you going to say to the 12-year-old chubby girl or boy who desperately wants to be thin? How are you going to handle that? You might say, go on a diet. You might say, get some exercise. Yeah, you can come up with any variants of those things. But is that the core issue? Is that going to resolve that child's life? So the 12-year-old chubby kid is now thin. All is better? Would that be your experience in life? You lost weight and all was better? Because you're the same person, right? Not the same physical being, but the immaterial part of you is still the same. So the problem is not the weight, etc., but something else that's in the heart. What about the non-athletic boy who so desires to be athletic? Now, all the years that I coached, I can tell you that a whole lot of kids really want to play college sports. And that's just not going to happen for very many. It's just not. And not everybody's meant to run and throw a ball or hit a ball or whatever. They're just not. I mean, how many professional athletes are there? How many college athletes are there? And then how many high school athletes are there? There's really not very many as a percentage of the population. So how many of them actually make a living being athletic? It's infinitesimal, right? So is there a chance that boy or that girl that really wants to be more athletic than they are, is there a chance that maybe that's just not the way God's wired them? And so why push them in a direction where that's just not the way that God wired them? And it was hard as a coach because parents probably as much as the kids want the kids to be athletic and play sports and be really good at it. At least as much, folks. I just have seen a lot of parents over the years who poured all this money into athletics from the time the kids are 5 or 6 years old and then all the way through into high school, hoping for that college education via sports. If they'd have just taken that money and put it in a bank, and the way the stock market goes, 6% a year, they probably would have paid for that college education. You know, all the money that gets poured into athletics now. So anyways, I know a lot of kids really want to be athletic, but I think it's more important that a kid find, for lack of a better term, their niche. And I'll say this about the young guys coming out of college, more so than the young girls coming out of college. They don't know what they want to do. They don't have that thing. I can't relate to that. I knew what I was going to do for a living when I was 15. That's just something that God gave me. But I can tell you from a lot of experience here with the young guys that are coming in, or Impact, that's our college group, right, and Kaleo, after college, they are struggling. The girls seem to be able to get that job that puts them in that helper position, which is the way they are by nature anyways. They seem to come out of their college, education, and they are into a career. And the guys just seem to like, I don't have that thing. I don't have that thing I'm really good at. And it is very difficult for them, very difficult. So all that to say, you may want to be athletic. You may want to be the mathematician. You may want to be a pastor. You may want to be one of those things, but that just may not be the way God's wired you. And it's better for us as parents to try to help our kids find that thing that they are gifted in, right? Or at least not gifted, at least talented in. Let's try to help them do that, because you could be a good athlete, and I can tell you I've coached a lot of athletes, and they're not any happier than the non-athletes. There's not any more joy. They're not walking with the Lord anymore or any less than anyone else. So anyways, what are you going to say to the non-athletic boy that wants to be really athletic, or the family who has so little and the guy really can't do any more to bring in sport? I mean, his job is his job, and that's all he can do. Hopefully it's enough to put some food on the table, but does he have to make a lot of money? I mean, we're in Walnut Creek, so, it's easy to say that, but hard to live in it, right? Very difficult. So anyways, what are you going to say to that family? Is God not providing? Whatever God's providing is God's providing. Let's be thankful for that, right? Just because you have more doesn't mean your life is better, right? Most people that have more, life is not better. It's actually more difficult. Or the man or the woman who's married to an abusive person. So what are you gonna say? Divorce? That's a hard one, because you could say, oh no, the Bible says no divorce unless there has been adultery, right? And that's true. That is what the Bible says. But it's when it's your child or your brother or your sister or your beliefs are going to be challenged. And there's a thing about us that wants to get out from underneath problems. You feel that way? Problem comes, who wants it? Let's get rid of it, right? So it's just within our human nature to want to get out from underneath the problems that we have. And so when life is hard, we'll sometimes bend to our flesh and away from the Scripture, take our trust off of God and put it on ourselves, really, and do what we want to do, because that's going to make us happy. Perhaps not really, but anyways, what are you going to say to that person? There are other options, by the way. Somebody always says, what about that abusive situation? What if it's physically abusive? Okay, well, there are other options other than divorce. There's physical separation. Doesn't have anything to do with anything legal. You're still married. You're just pulling yourself away from a situation where it's maybe harmful for you actually physically, because there's been physical abuse. There's nothing biblically wrong with that. Or there's actually legal separation. A legal separation accomplishes many of the same things that a divorce does, except you're still married, which means you can't get remarried. You're married. You're just legally separated. So you separate the assets, you figure out what you're going to do with the kids and that sort of thing, but you are still actually married to that person. Legally, you're under the legally separated category. But biblically, you're still married, right, until you're divorced. So there are other options when there's that kind of a situation, and we ought to be thinking about those, but but that's kind of separate to the kind of question that I'm asking. All right, what are you going to say to the girl that was raped? I should put that question last, huh? Because that is probably the most difficult thing that we can come across, I think. I got a great lesson from a gal named Laura Hendrickson. Laura's story is a great story. She's since passed away, sadly, because she was a great speaker, a good writer, and had a tremendous testimony. So I like to share bits and pieces of her testimony and then the advice that she gave us as counselors. So Laura's story was that she was not a Christian in college. She was going to some Texas University college. And while there was a big football parade and big party, lots of drinking, et cetera, et cetera. You can picture that in your mind, right? Okay, well, she got in the group that was at the back of the parade. And eventually, with all the drinking going on and then being isolated from the rest of the parade, some guy snatched her and raped her. So she was not a believer at this time, right? So she had to go through all of that. Then, just like 3 or 4 years later, something like that, she came to Christ. It had nothing to do with the rape. You probably would think, oh, that rape, brought her low. She looked up, and no, that's not how it happened. It was through some conversations with some other people and such. Anyways, she got saved, and then living on the West Coast, walking her dog on the beach, I think it was, in San Diego, some guy came out from a bathroom, dragged her into the bathroom, choked her, and raped her. Ugh. Exactly, right? Like, what do you say? What in the world do you say? Anyone has had it. I mean, now she's a believer. Wouldn't you be thinking, where's God? I thought as a believer, these kind of things wouldn't happen. God never promised that, right? And sometimes they do. So her story is a great one. She got through that. It was probably 25 years later. That guy did get caught. He did go to jail. And about 25 years later, they brought her back in and they wanted her to give testimony to keep the guy behind bars. So all of that came back up again. I mean, we're talking 25 years later, and all the memories and everything that something like that would do got brought all the way back up again. And she had to reprocess all that. So she went through a whole lot spiritually and all that kind of stuff. But she gave me the best piece of advice I can imagine. And it's not going to be what you think it is probably. But she said when someone is telling you a story like that and they're giving you the testimony, they're coming in for help, and they want help from you, she said you don't say anything, you don't give any advice, meaning you don't give any advice or counsel until the Kleenex box is empty. Think about that, what she's trying to say there. That is a great line, because our tendency is to want to get in there and solve that problem. And we know, spiritually speaking, that we have to get to God's providence in this, that God was somewhere, that God didn't do it, man did it. You got to get into where was God? It's a legitimate question. Where was he in all of this? You got to get there, but you don't get there in the first hour and a half or 2 hours. You don't get there even just because the Kleenex box is empty. But she's trying to say, hear a person out. Let them explain and tell everything when it's all completely out, and they have nothing else to really say about it. They're more likely then to be able to receive the kind of counsel that they need to get, but not in the first session. Anyways, I just really appreciated her words on that. So what are you going to say? How about the guy married to a controlling, domineering wife? You could go the other way around, but I don't know. This is how I phrased it. Or the 50-year-old guy who's just been fired. Now, I've had that question on there for a long time, and it didn't have much meaning in 2000, 2002, 2004, 2006. But in 2008, that carried a lot of weight, right? What are you going to say to that? I mean, when you're 25, you just, you get another job and you start over again. What of it, right? But when you're 50, you're not as hireable as when you were 25, right? And you're not as quick on your feet anymore either. So things are really different, and it's a whole lot of pressure. So what are you going to say? How are you going to help someone like that get through life? Or the parent of an angry kid. You have one of those? Anybody else want to give them back? They are very difficult to handle. So you say, Well, send them to a camp. Well, that's an option. There are a whole lot of other options than sending them away. But why are they angry? What is it they want that they're not getting, etc.? That's when we want to get down into the heart and process that information. The lonely person. How do you help the lonely person? Just make friends. Well, that's not going to work. Yeah, they already know that. How are you going to help them from a biblical perspective in solving the issue? Why are they lonely? Why are they not only lonely, but why are they alone? I mean, I know that you can be not alone and still be lonely, but most people that are lonely are not with a lot of other people. That can't happen. That's not most of the time. So how do you help a lonely person? So I'm not going to answer all the questions tonight, but I'm just giving you a whole lot of questions to think through this, just to lay a groundwork for the thing of the self-esteem. So I'm going to start reading some quotes. You'll see who they're from in a minute here. Today's college students are more narcissistic and self-centered than their predecessors, according to a comprehensive new study by 5 psychologists, not biblical counselors. Okay? So we're going to draw from some of their views of their own psychology. And remember, drawing back to the beginning of the year, that there's over 250 different psychologies. So when somebody's majoring in psychology, that doesn't really tell you anything other than they're not majoring in the Bible, right? And the answers to problems, right? They're coming out from a whole different perspective, but you have no idea what perspective it is. So this is coming from their own study of their own stuff. So I'll read that again. Today's college students are more narcissistic. That's not a surprise, right? Yeah. And self-centered, also not a surprise, than their predecessors, according to a comprehensive new study by 5 psychologists who worry that the trend could be harmful to personal relationships and American society. Can you see how that would be harmful? Absolutely. We need to stop endlessly repeating, "you're special," and having children repeat that back, said the study's lead author, Professor Jean Twenge of San Diego State University. Kids are self-centered enough already. So that is not from the Masters University. That is from San Diego State University, a public university that does not believe in the Bible or biblical counseling or anything else. It's coming from a public institution. They recognize the failures themselves. Twenge and her colleagues and findings to be presented at a workshop Tuesday in San Diego and on the Generations Gap examine the responses of 16,475 students nationwide completed in an evaluation called the Narcissistic Personality Inventory between 1982 2006, NPI. I love that, National Narcissistic Personality Inventory. But look at the numbers. 16,470, that's a lot of people. That's a good data test. It's not like they pulled 20 people on the street. 16,475 over a 24-year period across the nation, not just, in LA. So it's a pretty good data study. Not to knock LA. I grew up down there. Okay, the standardized inventory known as the MPI asks for responses to such statements as, "If I ruled the world, it would be a better place," or "I think I am a special person and I can live my life any way I want to." So they throw these things out, ask you to respond back. It's a typical data test. The researchers describe their study as the largest ever of its type and say students in MPI scores have risen steadily since the current test was introduced in 1982. By 2006, they said 2/3 of the students had above average scores, 30% more than 1982. The study asserts that narcissists are more likely to have romantic relationships that are short-lived, at risk of infidelity, lack of emotional support, warmth, and to exhibit game playing, dishonesty, and over-controlling and violent behaviors. Aren't you glad their self-esteem is up? Because that's what it's producing. It's turning people more inward, which they're already doing, right, in an effort to improve their life. Totally backfiring. Twenge, the author of Generation Me, Why Today's Young Are More Miserable Than Ever, said narcissists tend to lack empathy. How could they empathize? They're thinking about themselves. They empathize with one person, themselves. Sorry. They tend to lack empathy, react aggressively to criticism. They wouldn't like this class. And favor self-promotion over helping others. The researchers traced the phenomenon back to what they called the self-esteem movement that emerged in the 1980s, asserting that the effort to build self-confidence had gone too far. As an example, twins cited a song commonly sung to the tune of Forever Jacques in preschool, I am special, look at me, look at me. Okay. Oh, some of this makes you laugh, but some of it's maddening. Now, this is a separate quote, I think. Feeling pretty good about yourself. This is from, I think, a Newsweek article. I can't remember now. Feeling good about yourself. That's great. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you are smarter, healthier, or more successful than others. And if that's not enough, people don't like you very much either. After nearly 2 decades of teachers, parents, and therapists focusing on their efforts on boosting children's self-esteem, a team of psychologists has found no evidence that boosting self-esteem through school programs or therapeutic conventions leads to any positive outcomes. This is a different author. The research team looked at studies linking self-esteem to school performance, job and task performance, interpersonal relations, happiness, aggression, antisocial behavior, and health issues such as eating, drinking, and drug use, smoking, and sex. Although there are modest correlations between self-esteem and school performance, it is more likely that good performance leads to high self-esteem than the other way around. Same holds true for job performance. More importantly, efforts to boost self-esteem have not been shown to improve academic performances and may sometimes be counterproductive, the researchers found. Nor does high self-esteem prevent children from smoking, drinking, taking drugs, or engaging in early sex. If anything, high self-esteem fosters experimentation, which may increase early sexual activity and drinking. That's not a surprise, right? If you're focusing on yourself, what are you going to do? Please yourself, exactly, in any way you can. People with high self-esteem claim they are more likable. Love that. I'm more likable. Okay. Wow. I wonder what the people around him would say. People with high self-esteem claim they are more likable and attractive and have better relationships than others, but these advantages exist mainly in their own minds. Objective data, such as ratings by their peers, generally fail to confirm their high opinion of themselves. In some cases, they actually are disliked more than others because they're selfish. They're focusing on themselves. So let's talk about what the theory of self-esteem is trying to say. Let me say this, though, before I get to that part. Self-esteem is probably the most prevalent psychology, I think, that's out there still. But I don't think it's going to be, and I don't know that it even is right now, the most common answer for solving today's problems. I think the most common answer is medication. That switch has been turning. Boy, I started studying biblical counseling in 1995, and the ministry in 98. And I would say then self-esteem is probably still the most prevalent, but somewhere over the next 10 years, that was turning at a fairly rapid pace. And I think the medication thing has overtaken that. So what I'm talking about is the answer to people's problems, where it was very common and dominant in the 80s and 90s to be self-esteem. I think that switched to medication. That doesn't mean that there's not a place for medication, but it's not going to change a person's heart, and it's very rare that it's really has much to do with what's going on in a person's life. It's when I say rare, I mean I don't even know what the numbers are, but it may be 1 in 100 in my mind, so maybe even less than that. So there is a time for medication. I'll talk about that later in the year. But interestingly, when the first time I did this, I taught this lesson 19 years ago, and I did a Google search on it. There were 833,000 websites. So you do a Google search, and in the bottom it shows you how many websites pop up, 833,000. As of 2 years ago, it was over 45 million. A part of that is the growth in the internet. Okay, but it's not just the growth in the internet. It's just Satan. Okay. All right, what does self-esteem teach? First of all, many of your problems stem from a bad self-image or a low self-esteem. Let's look over in hopefully you brought your manual tonight, page 139. We're going to be going back and forth 3 times to this. So why do people struggle? What are their problems? What does the world say? So 139, Roman numeral 2, down the middle of your page. Some of man's mistaken explanations for a low view of self, or quote-unquote poor self-esteem. Their poor surroundings. So whose poor surroundings is it, by the way? Yeah, so it'd be, if it was me, it'd be my poor surroundings, my unfulfilling work, my physical handicaps. Other people belittle me. My parents have rejected me. I don't have any money. I don't have enough education. Work your way all the way through that list. All of the focus is on self. What self is not getting from other people or other things. That's not to say that there aren't some things that, I would rather not have a physical handicap. But I know lots of people that have physical handicaps. They don't have any of the problems that people that don't have physical handicaps have. So it's not the physical handicap. In fact, if you want to check out a video, look up Nick Vujicic. So I heard a lot of, Nick Vujicic. It's Vujicic, I think. It's incredible. No arms, no legs, right? Yep. Unbelievable. Just look it up and watch the YouTube. It's short. It's like 5 minutes. You can't say that it's a physical handicap. That's the problem. Or you don't have enough money. Most people don't have any money. Very few people have any money. Do you know that? Very few people actually pay any taxes. So they obviously don't have any money. It's not money. It's not your surroundings. It's not your parents. Not that can't make life a little more difficult. It can. Sure, the relational things are probably harder than physical, things you don't have physically, but we can't pin it on those things. But man has ruled the heart out. They didn't even think about the heart. They didn't think about that, right? So you have to come up with some kind of a cause. So this is just one of those things that they do. So, number 2, you have to learn to love yourself before you can love others. Now this is one that came right out of the world of psychology. Remember, this is from people that don't know God, that have already rejected God, come up with their own ideas on life, right? So they're people that are unable to understand spiritual things, and the heart is a spiritual thing. So they really don't know what they're talking about, but it's just something that they've come up with. So that got brought in, I think, more like the 60s, and that weaseled its way into the Christian community in the 70s, and then planted itself in the church in the 80s. Just absolutely planted itself in the church. And the church just latched onto it for what reason, I really don't know, but they just, it's just so appealing, right? You're telling me I need to think more about myself? That's very appealing because I like thinking about myself, right? So anyways, it came in through, from the world and largely through the Christian universities. I hate to say that, but that's a fact. Biola would be the leader in that, Rosemead School of Psychology, numero uno in that. And that's hard to say because Biola is largely a good school. But this part of their school is completely false. It's flat out false, right? Sad, very sad to see how many people have gone down that road. But I can just tell you, a whole lot of people have gone down that road, that psychology part, and then got taught biblical counseling and thought, I knew that stuff was wrong. I was in the class, I paid all the money, I knew it was wrong while I was taking the class, but I didn't know why. I've had so many people come through Cornerstone over the years and just catch me afterward and say, I just knew it. And I'm so, whatever the word is, that I wasted all that money on something that was completely useless. Now, there's something to studies, research studies, and all that kind of stuff. We're not talking about research. We're not talking about how children's brains grow and, how to alter some behavior. We're not talking about that kind of stuff. We're talking about the problems that you and I face in life and why we are the way we are and how to fix us. That's where the problems lie when we look outside of ourselves. So anyways, it's largely come through the Christian schools. I did a study. Some of you are probably going to want this. I did a study, oh goodness, over 10 years ago now. I polled 25 Christian schools and universities, most of them on the West Coast. I asked them 7 questions, the same 7 questions, got all of their answers back. One of them asked me not to publish it. I said I couldn't do that. It'll be right along with the other ones. I'm not publishing it anyways. I just have it available if anybody wants it. So I pulled all those together. So if you have a Christian school you're thinking about on the West Coast, whether for you or your child, and you want to see what the answers are to those questions, just send me an email. I'll send you the study. One of those is, what do you think about biblical counseling, basically? Questions like, do all your professors have to believe the same thing doctrinally? Or where are you at with Calvinism versus Arminianism? There's some really solid questions. And there is only 2 that are supportive of biblical counseling. All the other ones are all over the map, depending on the schools. And one of those is Masters University. Used to be Masters College. They are doing the best job. And their undergrad program has now overgrown Rosemead's School of Psychology in Biola, because people have seen it's a bunch of baloney. All this Freud and Skinner and Maurer and stuff, it's a bunch of baloney, right? It's a fad. Satan's always brought something new into the picture, and then it goes away because it's a fad. But the Bible stands as an anvil that a lot of hammers have hit against, and it still stands, right? It's not a fad. It's God's word. So anyways, it's just sad to say that these things have come right through the Christian schools. Thirdly, you have to raise your self-esteem. So if you go back to page 139 in Roman numeral 3, here's some of the ideas that the world has come up with. Since the problem is your low view of self, how can you build yourself up? And so these are the things, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of these, maybe all of them. You need to accept yourself. Do not get mad, get even. If you feel like it, do it. Be sure your perceived needs are met. I'll talk about that in a minute. You need to learn to love yourself, as if they don't already. You need to discover the God within you. You need to forgive yourself. Now, I understand when someone says, well, I need to let that go. I need to stop thinking about it and accept God's forgiveness. That's different than forgiving yourself. So some people mean, when they say I need to forgive myself, they mean I need to accept God's forgiveness of me. No problem with that. But sometimes they actually need to forgive themselves, and that's what they think they have to do, as if they're God. You need to get in touch with yourself. That was really prevalent in the 70s. Pursue self-actualization. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Assert yourself. Tell people of your accomplishments. Be your own person. Put the blame on someone else. Practice visualization. That was actually fairly popular as of 10 years ago. It's kind of gone away. We won't talk about that tonight, though. All right, so make sure your perceived needs are met. All right, so how many of you are familiar with the name Larry Crabb? Probably only about 10 of you at this point, yeah. So he was around in the 80s and the 90s, read a lot of books. One of them was called Effective Biblical Counseling. It is not biblical counseling. It is integrated counseling. I have the book. It was my sister's, and I just can't believe it's called Effective Biblical Counseling when it quotes Freud and Abraham Maslow. I don't know how that can be biblical counseling. The Bible doesn't say anything about the unconscious or this hierarchy of needs that Maslow said you have to have. It just doesn't exist in the Bible. It's made up. So if you get that book, just note it's not biblical counseling. It's something else. So this is what Larry Crabb said. Sorting through this stream of unconsciousness. Stream of what? Unconsciousness. Who made up the unconscious? Freud did. But this is Larry Crabb quoting. So sorting through this stream of unconsciousness, a simple organization emerges. People have one basic personal need. That's important you see that word need, which requires, if it's a need, then something's required. It requires 2 kinds of input for its satisfaction. The most basic need is a sense of personal worth. Is that in the Bible? And acceptance of oneself as a whole real person. The 2 required inputs to get personal worth are significance That is, you need to have a purpose in your life. You need to be important, get a good job. Your life has to have meaning, impact, and things of that nature. And then security, which he redefines as love, unconditional, consistently expressed, permanent acceptance. These are part of the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that you have to have these things met for you to actually ever reach your potential. Then you have to have these kinds of things in your life. Without those things, you can't get there. You can't reach your potential in life. Anywhere in the Bible? Nowhere in the Bible. Right? So again, it's made up stuff. Abraham Maslow brought into the church by Larry Crabb. I would say partially grabbed onto by the church. Some of you, those of you that raised your hands, probably read something that he wrote in the late 80s or early 90s when he was more popular. And because it's a fad, 90% of you have never heard of him. Because it's a fad. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is simply made up. But boy, doesn't that appeal to you? Yeah, if I just felt a little more secure, I felt if I was a little more significant, then I would be able to reach my potential. I'd be a happier person. It sounds plausible. It's just not biblical. This is made up. So we're better off just taking those kinds of things and putting those in what I call the circular file and getting rid of them, and press the default button and restart your computer and your mind and let go of that kind of stuff. By the way, I realized I went over the last line, and you want to fill in your blanks. But I already mentioned anyways the perceived needs. Freud said it was the power, your need for power and pleasure. Now, there's no doubt that people desire power and pleasure. People desire to be significant and secure, right? There's no doubt we desire that. I don't have any problem when someone says, man, I really would like to feel a little more secure in my life. I get that. But you can't say that you need that to bring glory to God. You can bring glory to God in the darkest hours of your life, in the worst hours of your life. And didn't Paul pray 3 times? Remove the thorn in the side of my foot. Please remove it. And God said, no, because my grace is sufficient. My grace is enough. And how are you going to know about my grace unless you go through suffering? If life is easy, you don't know anything about grace, right? There's common grace that we all have, but until life is really hard, you just don't have that. I mean, haven't you met somebody that's been through really hard times, and man, they are just rock solid, and you just wish you were as solid as they are, but you've never been through anything that they have. So it does. I mean, hard times change people's lives, and for believers, they change us for the better, right? We grow more in the valleys than we do in the mountaintops. And life is hard. Life is hard. So, number 5, you must get in touch with yourself and your feelings to find fulfillment today. Get in touch with yourself. You know what you find when you get in touch with yourself? Yourself. That's it. Go find your bliss. Eat, love, pray. However it's phrased. Go and get in touch with yourself. This was kind of, I think, probably popularized in the 60s and 70s, and the midlife crisis kind of thing. And the guy would go off and leave his family, buy a Porsche, and go get in touch with himself, right? Or you go on some kind of crazy retreat thing and get in touch with yourself. Anyways, those are 5 different thoughts out of self-esteem, what they teach. There are a lot of others. All right, here's some ideas that are swirling around Christian circles that are basically the same thing or worded a little differently. First of all, you have, as I said before, you have to love others before yourself before loving others. We've already, I think, studied in the class Matthew chapter 22, where there is 2 commandments, not 3. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love one another as you love yourself. That is not a 3rd commandment. It is a premise to the commandment. Love others as you love yourself, because you already do love yourself. So with the same focus, the same energy, the same attention that you naturally put on yourself, put that on other people. You find a different life when you do that. 1 John 4 7 and 8 says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. The one who does not love does not know God, for God is love." Basically saying if you don't love your brother, you may not know God. There's no command there to love yourself. Your command is to love your brother. Second one, without good self-esteem, you cannot solve problems, relate to others effectively, or even grow spiritually. And 2 Corinthians 3, 5, and 6 says, "Not that we are adequate in ourselves to consider as anything coming from ourselves." Coming from ourselves, right? But our adequacy is from God, who also made us adequate as servants of a new covenant. And Philippians 4:13 says, "I can do all things through him who strengthens me." It is him we need, and not self-esteem that we need. It's his grace and his sufficiency. Thirdly, the need for self-worth is the greatest of human needs in the world today. Would you call self-esteem the greatest need? Even if you called it a need, and even if it was an actual need, would you call that the greatest need? What would the greatest need be? I heard that. Jesus, you need to be saved, right? The world starts to take shape once your heart has been opened up. Once the dead person is now alive, your life begins to take shape. You're not going to love other people unless you're known by God, right? It comes vertically and then it moves out horizontally. To call it the greatest need, or even one of the greatest human needs, it is not a need. You can live without it. You can glorify God probably better without it. Fourthly, in order to accomplish anything of significance, positive thinking about oneself is a necessity. Okay, so the Bible never says that, obviously. John 15, 4 through 5 says it is the vine we need to stay connected to produce fruit. It is not self-esteem. It says, "Abide in me and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine. So neither can you unless you abide in me." It doesn't say neither can you unless you have good self-esteem. Right? It's about abiding in Christ. Fifthly, as I mentioned earlier, you must learn to forgive yourself in order to find peace and fulfillment in life. I commented on that already, so I won't again. And then God wants us all to feel good about ourselves. Okay, so how do you think David felt when he wrote Psalm 51 after he murdered Uriah, all right, and fathered a child? He wrote the psalm in Psalm 51, Psalm 32, Psalm 38. How did David feel when those moments hit him, when God took the child from that relationship? Was he feeling good about himself? He was at rock bottom. And what did God say about that rock bottom heart? Yeah, God loved the broken and contrite heart, didn't he? He loves a broken heart, not the heart that's filled with self-esteem. He wants a broken and contrite heart. I think he felt awfully bad about himself at that point in time, and yet God restored him. Philippians 2, I don't think this is in your notes, so if you want to turn in your Bibles there, Philippians 2 is a great, all the Bible's great, but I mean, Philippians 2, there's so much meat in it. Therefore, if there is any encouragement in Christ, if there's any consolation of love, if there's any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affection and compassion, make my joy complete by being of the same mind, maintaining the same love of each other, not oneself, maintaining the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant or a slave in the language actually, being made in the likeness of men, being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself. He didn't esteem himself. He humbled himself. He brought himself low by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. For this reason also God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name, so that at the time of Jesus every knee will bow, of those who are in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and that every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God. Do nothing from selfishness. Nothing. Question? Yeah, so I think I bring this up next week, but I can comment now on it. What about the person who is abusive to themselves, right? And they say they hate themselves. Let's take that to the worst degree. They hated themselves so much that they committed suicide. Okay, so in its worst case, suicide, who benefited from that? Who, when they took their life, who were they thinking would benefit from taking their own life? Themselves. They thought, so even in, you understand the difference in hate and love. Hate is wanting to have nothing to do with. I don't have anything to do with it. That's hate. I don't know if you know that, but you can look it up in one of your Bible dictionaries. Would have nothing to do with. Love is actually putting your attention onto something. It's doing something for someone for their benefit. You don't benefit from it, right? It's doing something for other people. That's what love is. So a person who takes their own life, they're doing something to benefit themselves. So they're actually loving themselves. It looks like hate, but it's not hate. That's not to say their life isn't hard, or we couldn't all at some point in time understand why or how. I think we can all probably understand a little bit of that. Some of you a lot more than other people that are here tonight. But at its rawest moment, they are doing something that they think will benefit themselves. And everyone else suffers the consequence of that. Yeah. So the people that are a burden, like a financial burden, a physical burden, like everybody's got to take care of me, I'd rather just die. That's a hard one, because I think we all can understand that at the end of the life, but who controls life? If we're going to take control, if we're going to take control of life there, what's the next thing we're going to take control of? Right? Where's the line? I feel I'm a burden on my family sometimes. Don't you feel like you're a burden sometimes on your family? Aren't you ever in a bad mood? Okay, that's really dumbed down, right? I realize that. But I'm taking an extreme that you brought up, which is a great question, and the other extreme, which I'm a burden because I'm in a bad mood. And where's the line in all of that? And did God say, I don't want you to be a burden on other people? Isn't it sometimes for other people's benefit that you're a burden? Absolutely. So I get where people are coming from, and it's hard, but they are doing that for their own benefit. That people are not benefiting from it, and God doesn't want you to do that anyways. We know that already. But just to reason it out further, it's still done for self. I don't want to be a burden to you. How do you know they don't want you to be a burden? Yeah? So anyways, good question. So, does God really want us all to feel good about ourselves? Biblically, we just cannot say that. So, conclusion to the fallacy of self-esteem. The bottom line with self-esteem is that it is important that I feel good about me, and that when I do, I'll do and I'll be better. That's the essential of self-esteem. In its cover article, February, and this is going a long time back now, in 1992, a Newsweek article, this is what it says: the tremendous influence of self-esteem in the nation and problems it caused. The article concluded that much of the self-esteem industry in the country was simply dealing in nonsense, and suggested that teachers, parents, and children who believe that emphasis on self-esteem will improve their performances are fooling themselves. In addition, according to U.S. News and World Report, there is almost no research evidence that these self-esteem programs actually work. A.W. Tozier, someone we're pretty familiar with: every man with moral intelligence must be aware of the curse that afflicts him inwardly. He must be conscious of the thing that we call ego. In the Greek, ego is self. I find that interesting. Freud invented the idea of the ego, and in the Greek, ego or ego is actually translated as self. I find that funny. By the Bible called flesh or self, but by whatever name called a cruel master and a deadly foe. Paul Vitz is an associate professor of psychology at New York University. He was an atheist who converted to Catholicism, got his PhD at Stanford, was still alive as of a couple of years ago. This is his comment. The glorification of self is contrary to what Scripture teaches. It should be obvious that the relentless and single-minded search for and glorification of the self is at direct cross-purposes with the Christian injunction to lose the self. Certainly, Jesus Christ neither lived nor advocated a life that would qualify by today's standards as self-actualized or reaching one's potential. For the Christian, the self is the problem, not the potential paradise. Understanding this problem involves an awareness of sin, especially of the sin of pride. Correcting this condition requires the practice of such unself-actualized states as contrition, penitence, humility, obedience, trust in God, and you could say a few other things as well. Tim Keller made this comment about it. The essence of gospel humility is not thinking more of myself or less of myself. It is thinking of myself less. I really like that part of it. I think it's always amazing to me when somebody asks you how you're doing that you know. You know, because you think about it. Be better off if we just said, I don't know, let me think about it. David Pallison, who runs the Christian Counseling Education Foundation, CCEF, back in Philadelphia, one of the pillars in the biblical counseling arena, said that low self-esteem is actually a form of pride and of the compulsive drive towards self-righteousness that operates in everyone. He elaborates, people generate their own faulty expectations and idealized images of what or who they ought to be. Sometimes they fail to meet them. Their own lie-distorted conscience accuses them. Hence, they suffer symptomatic low self-esteem. Something that looks like he means it looks like it's low self-esteem, but it's actually high self-esteem. Okay, so we're going to transition away from that, cover a few things that are, I believe, also in your manual in this chapter. What about envy, jealousy, coveting, and greed, and how would we define those terms? This is going to be helpful because when I ask a bunch of questions moving forward, people often confuse envy and jealousy. They often say, I'm jealous, when they actually mean envious. So this might be helpful. The first term that's in your notes there, a discontented feeling that arises in the selfish heart in view of what someone else has or has achieved. That passion that sees in another qualities that it covets, often resulting in hate for their possessor. That is envy. You might have thought that was jealousy because we, as I said, we confuse the terms and switch them. The next one is actually jealousy. That's resentment or suspicion or fear that another person is seeking to take away what you perceive to be yours. Ladies, you might go back to 3rd grade when some girl was taking your best friend. Jealousy. You think someone's taking away something that you think is yours. Envy is that discontented feeling of what someone else has or has achieved, and you want that for yourself. Similar to that is coveting. This is wanting what God has not ordained you to have, usually directed at what belongs to another, but not always. But wanting something that God has not ordained you to have, wanting a bigger house, a bigger car, someone else's wife, husband, whatever, coveting. And then greed, a strong desire for more than what God wants you to have of what you already have. You already have money, you want more money. You already have a wife, you want something else other than more that she's giving you. You get the gist. This, by the way, I don't know if you've ever thought about this before, but coveting and greed are the root sins of pornography. Now put that back into there, wanting what God has not ordained you to have. God did not ordain you to have that girl or guy on that screen. And a strong desire for more than what you already have, if you are already married and you want something more than that, you are greedy. Have you thought about that before? If I just walked up and you said, you know what, you're really greedy. Anybody like me think, I'm not greedy? If you love porn, you're greedy. That's kind of an ouch, don't you think? I mean, porn is just kind of like almost accepted as going to be just kind of a normal problem in life. And I get that part, but we wouldn't think of greed as normal, right? Isn't greed like in a separate category? But it's not biblically. That's the root of it, the root sin of it. Greed. All right, now how do you know if any of these are issues for you? And I have a bunch of questions. I won't spend too much time reasoning these things out because they're just questions to get you to be thinking about, well, maybe that's something that I do. Is that me being envious? Is that me being jealous, coveting, or greedy? And so this is for you to be thinking about yourself. All right, so do you find yourself putting others down in your words or your thoughts? Do you find yourself doing that? Criticizing someone else? Maybe it's just in your mind and you have the self-control not to let it come out. Or maybe it comes out. So do you find yourself critical of other people? Maybe that's an issue of envy or jealousy. Do you find yourself thinking about others' accomplishments or possessions in a demeaning manner? Do you find yourself questioning others' motives on a consistent basis? Or do you assume or accuse others as being selfish with respect to their material possessions? Or do you find yourself comparing your material possessions, abilities, spiritual gifts, or any other circumstances? So you take that question and move it back into, okay, so yeah, let's say I do that. Let's say I do compare what I have versus what someone else has. Okay, so why am I comparing? Is that envy, jealousy, coveting, greed? What is that? It's a chance for you to think this through for yourself, right? 6, do you find yourself desiring or demanding things that you don't have? Do you find yourself brooding about life not being fair? Do you have a kid that ever says that? Some of us are just big kids. 8, do you find yourself striving to acquire more than God has planned for you in a way that it has got in the way of your walk? So you work 2 jobs, 3 jobs, you work 14 hours a day, whatever. So you don't have any time for the Lord, you don't have any time for personal devotional time. You're busy achieving without actually growing. Number 9, are you trying to keep up with the Joneses? 10, do you find yourself ignoring or avoiding those who are being recognized or honored? And then last, do you find yourself boasting about your own accomplishments to the advance of your own cause? I think there's something to be said for boasting in the Lord and what the Lord is doing, but that's different than boasting about yourself and advancing your cause, right? I think I think, and I said this in a sermon last year, that I think there should be more boasting going on because God is doing great things in people's lives. Why do we not share that more? And I think we're so far on the other side of the pendulum from being prideful to being humble that we're so humble that we never tell anyone what God is doing in our life. We never tell anyone and never share the great things that God's been doing. We ought to be talking about those things. I think it's very encouraging when you hear what God is doing in someone else's life. So let's boast in the Lord, but let's not boast in ourselves to advance ourselves. Okay, so what do you do if these are one of your 4 issues? And what do you do? First of all, call the sin by its name. If it's envy, call it envy. Don't be afraid of it. Just call it what it is. I'm a jealous person. I'm a greedy person. Okay, just call it what it is. That's the start. And then identify it as the root issue of being pleasing self rather than glorifying God. I want more than I was ordained to have. I want to be someplace I'm not. I want to have something I don't have because I want to be pleased. I want to be happy. And doesn't life revolve around me? Isn't this me and the world going around me? Isn't the world here to make me happy? That's a hard thing to say, but when you're being greedy, when you're acting jealous, when you're envying, that's what you're doing. You're putting yourself at the center. So here's a list for you and for others. We'll move to a close on these things. Put off esteeming yourself and put on esteeming others as more important. If you've been taught that you need to build your own self-esteem and that's really your problem, I just can't encourage you enough to let go of that. Just put that away. That did not come from God. It's nowhere in the Bible. And we've talked through the sufficiency of Scripture, right? That the Bible has everything we actually need for all of life. So if it's all there, we don't need anything else. Self-esteem is not in there, therefore we do not need it. So put it away, let it go. If you have books on that kind of stuff, which a lot of you probably do, you know what to do with those. Put them in the trash. So put off esteeming yourself, put on esteeming others. I think that fits more with Scripture, loving your brother, right? It just fits with all of Scripture. Other people, I hope, are more important than you are to yourself. Put off worrying about self and put on being concerned and showing concern for other people. I mean, the truth is, when you do this, you find your worries take a back seat, don't they? When you actually think about other people and trying to help other people, your problems are lighter. Your load is lighter. And that's not why we do that. It's just a natural byproduct of getting your mind off of yourself and onto other people. It's just the way it's supposed to be. Now, put off a fear of man. Put on a fear of God. I'm so glad many of you are reading the book that you got through this class. I hope that you all finish that book. Need people less, love people more. That summarizes the whole book. You don't need people to make you happy. You don't need people to make you feel good. You don't need people for any of that stuff. What you need is to love people more. And the more you do that, the more freedom that you find. Put off complaining and grumbling and coveting, etc. Put on accepting what God has offered you and thankfulness, a thankful heart. You're never going to get all you want in life. And I can tell you, if you finally ever do get all you want in life, you still will not be happy. Just not how it works. Put off self-centered thinking about your own needs. Put on a mind that thinks on others' needs and how you can meet them. And then lastly, put off selfish desires to be successful and put on being significant in the lives of others. In other words, it's not about your accomplishments. At the end of the day, when you're 70 and 80 or whatever, I think you're going to look back on our life and look at the people that we were able to serve, the people we discipled, right? That's the relationship things that will be more important to us when we're 70, 80, looking back on life. It won't be the stuff. It won't be the job. It won't be the money. It won't be the house. It'll be the relationships that we built and perhaps things that we might have done to help other people help other people. I mean, there are people that give large amounts of money to counseling organizations, biblical counseling organizations. We're talking about $100,000 type thing and that goes out and gets put out into the counseling community to grow and help other people. Just think about that. Think about the impact that you can have. And if you affect one person's life and that person affects two other people's lives and they affect other people's lives, your little family tree has a lot of people at the end of it. You go 2 or 3 generations down. I told you Al Siebert's the guy that led me to Christ and discipled me for 8 years. And I wrote him an email a couple of years ago. I just wanted him to know the impact that he's had not only on me, but the impact he had on me that has now gone down into other people. I mean, it's wide, right? I mean, it's just, I can't believe what God has done around here. I can't believe how many churches are now doing biblical counseling, over 100. My love for the Word of God came from Al. Al just taught the Word of God. I mean, you could spend 2 minutes with Al, and Jesus' name is going to come up. That's it. It just flows right out of him. And that love for the Word, that love for Christ I got that from Al. And I wanted Al to know his family tree, who he wouldn't have known. I mean, he's been doing Youth for Christ. Well, I met him in 1973. He's still doing it. He's still doing it. He's 65, I think. Right? I mean, usually you do youth ministry and then you're 35 and you have to go on to adults. Right? No, this is Al's thing, and he's thousands and thousands of young people that he's really helped out. So there's ways to give financially, folks. There's a university called LeTourneau that was funded by one person. Moody was funded by Moody. Right? There are big donor gifts. Salem Communications is where the money came from for Master's College or university now to buy out the Christian college that was there before it. And the Christian college that was there before it had integrated counseling. And that school was declining rapidly, needed to get out from underneath it. And Salem Communications, which is your Christian radio station, they went in and gave, I think it was $34 million, so if John MacArthur would be the president of the university. And he did. He went in and he cleaned house. And now it's Masters. It's awesome. So, I mean, I think those are brothers that are there, but it's one family gave $34 million to that to make that happen. So yeah, there are ways to do things on a financial way. There's ways to do things on a personal way. But that is where at the end of your life, you're going to look back and want to see that's more significant than retiring at 55 or having a big house or whatever. That's the kind of thing that is really going to stand the test of time. That's gold, silver, precious stones, right? All the other stuff is wood, hay, and stubble. So put off selfish desires to be successful and put on being significant. This last quote is from what I would call my first pastor, Roy Roberts, at Seal Beach Grace Brethren, back in the 70s. He was only there for about a year, but he was an impactful guy, one of those big, heavy-set guys with a booming voice. And he said something I'll never forget. There's an amazing sense of freedom that is felt when one invests his life in another. It's so true. An amazing sense of freedom that is felt when you invest your life in another. It's not about getting for yourself. It's not about all this stuff that the world is trying to talk people into. It's putting all that stuff away and investing your life in other people. The best returns ever. So, for all those people that we talked about in the beginning of class, the 12-year-old chubby girl, the guys with the poor family, it's all those kind of things. We're going to talk more about those in detail next week, okay? But in all those cases, for all those situations, you would say this: get your mind off yourself and live a life that enjoys pleasing and glorifying God. If that's where you're aiming at, you'll be fine. You'll actually enjoy life now. Mind off yourself. Stop thinking about what you don't have. Stop it. Give your life away. There's just nothing more pleasing than that. Nothing more glorifying than that. Let me close in prayer. Father God, it is so true that if we just aim at pleasing you and bringing glory to your name, that life takes shape. And we find what we probably do desire, which is to be happy, to have a full life. I think we all want to have that. But I think I've learned, and I hope I've taught well tonight, that comes through just aiming at whatever it is that would please you and bring glory to your name, not ourselves. So I pray, Lord, that each of us would be thoughtful about this week, about this chapter, and if there's anything we need to clean up, that you would help us to do that. Help us, Lord, to take our minds off of ourselves. We're so selfish. Man, forgive us for that, Lord. We are just naturally oriented towards wanting what we want because that's what we want. So we know that you forgive us for that, but we still put that before you in confession and thank you for forgiveness and for your understanding and your mercy and your grace in those things. But at the same time, we need to change some things. So I pray, God, that you'll help us to do that. In Jesus' name, amen.